Amanda,
Okay,
I'm not.
sorry, I was apparently muted that whole time.
Okay, I was just gonna say, go ahead. I'm gonna mute myself and you
Okay.
go.
I am not actually seeing the green box. Which screen are you seeing? Are you seeing our homepage or are you seeing like Teams and stuff?
I'm seeing the Minneapolis Community Adult Education homepage with the Register Now button.
Okay, great, because it looks like it's not sharing that one on my screen. So good to know that it is. All right, so yes, welcome. My name is Amanda Headlee. I am a distance learning coordinator and also a orientation teacher for our Minneapolis Public Education Adult Education. I teach 3 sections of orientation. We do low-level ELL orientation, which covers pre-lit through ELL level 2 in our school out of 6. We also have high-level ELL orientation, level 3 through 5, and then a high school equivalency or GED orientation for students who are ELL level 3 or are non-ELL students. So really quickly, as we're getting started, I want to just poll all of the participants and just kind of curious which level of orientation you would like to go the most in depth on. So Andrew, if you could put that poll in there. So just again, which one are you most interested in learning about? If it's kind of an even spread, I'll just sort of talk about a little about all of them.
All right, I'll give about 2 more seconds, 2-3 more seconds for people to vote. All right.
Okay, so it looks like the bulk is HSE orientation, with also a pretty good amount who want to learn about low level. So I'll try and do most of the split between those two and mostly cover the HSE side of things. Okay. So I was thinking for this presentation, mostly just walking you through sort of the perspective of a student who is joining our program. The first step for our students is on our homepage, which is recently redesigned. The first step is they will click on the Register Now button. And then once they hit that Register Now button, they will go to a Google Sheets registration form. This has actually had it's quite a marvel, but this registration form has instructions in English, Spanish, Hmong, and Somali. Okay, and then this form, the students enter their email address that they're most comfortable getting an email at, and then they pick which language they're most comfortable with to proceed through the rest of the form. And then the rest of the form is translated into the respective languages. So if somebody were to select that they wanted Hmong, let's see if I can go through this without accidentally submitting one. Oh, let's just do demo. Okay. All right, so then the rest of the form would then be in Hmong. Okay, so then that helps us to reduce translation issues if a student is confused about what we are asking for on a form. I think we've gotten pretty good success out of getting the right information the first time out of students. I know when we were doing in-person registrations, the forms that we had were in English, and then if a student, depending on which site they were at and what time of day, they might have somebody there who could help walk them through the form. But I know I think have one staff who can speak Hmong, so not good chances if they're that language. But just for the sake of the presentation, we'll switch back to English. So then we're asking the basic SID information questions. What's your birthday? Have you attended classes here before? That's helpful for us just so that we can look up if they have recent test scores. and that kind of stuff. All right, looks like it's not going to let me get through this registration form without more of a hassle. But yeah, so it's just asking them all that kind of stuff. And then a few of the other questions that we have included in the form are things like, do you have a documented disability? Do you need help setting up a Gmail? That kind of stuff, which is helpful for our various staff members down the line. Just helps us know who needs help right away so that we can get them that help before they join orientation, ideally. Okay, and I think right then, before we get too much farther, I know we just started, but if anyone has any questions, go ahead and chat them, turn your microphones on. I'm going to pause roughly every website to give you all time to process and ask questions. So if there are any questions right away.
Hey, Amanda, this is Tim. I was just going to say, we have the Tennyson warning translated somewhere in there too, right?
I believe so. Yeah.
Further on down the line.
Yeah.
Which is a highlight.
Yes. Okay. I'm not seeing any questions or anyone typing, so I will proceed. One thing that I can't show, it's kind of a behind the scenes aspect of the registration form, which is also in the agenda with the links. But the registration form, we receive the student information in Google Sheets, and then we use Autocrat, which is a Google Sheet add-on, which is basically a tool that we can use to send students automatic emails or send anybody automatic emails based on a few trigger questions. So for example, all students at the end of their form would receive an email that confirms that their form has been received, somebody's working on it, and somebody will follow up with them. And then also, if a student answers that disability question saying that they have a disability, our disability coordinators get an email letting them know that somebody said they have a disability. And then along a similar vein, if somebody says they need help setting up a Gmail account, which for our program is both required if they're going to use a Chromebook, but then also some of our Schoology capabilities they're hinging on having a Gmail account. So we will also can send an email to the orientation teachers like myself and let them know the student says that they don't have a Gmail account and they need help setting one up. It is a pretty complicated process, so it's nice being able to catch those students before they get into orientation to prevent needing to take a lot of time for just that one-on-one with a student, which can be really difficult in an online format. And then I see there's a question in the chat, says, do you present online? I'm assuming you mean orientation, but yes, our orientation is entirely online. All of our classes are online. I know we are sort of unique in that, from what I've heard, most programs at this point are still doing in-person orientations to some degree. We are not. We are doing entirely online orientations. We use Schoology, not Google Meet. No problem. Okay. So once students have filled out the registration forms, and then our LSS staff process those forms, and we'll follow up with the student and send an email to them and say, you are registered for orientation on this date. You know, all the details, the registration, what time, and then they also get a link to what we call our PreOrientation Google site. So again, on this site, we have translated pages for Somali, Hmong, and Spanish, Hmong, Somali. On this page, we also have, we're working on improving this page, as we are always working on improving all of our processes. But we got some feedback early on that our page was pretty complicated and it was overwhelming for students. So right now we're working on simplifying it. But on our page, we have our 3 orientation teachers. We have our 2 daytime orientation teachers, Nate and Dave. And then we have me, who teaches evening orientation, all 3 sections. We are also working on adding like the sort of first day components for orientation because we're using Google, or not Google Meet, we're using Schoology Conferences for all of our classes. It is a little counterintuitive for students, so they often tell us that they have problems logging in. They're not sure where to go. They're not sure how to sign in. It's kind of complicated if they're on a phone. They don't know they can't use the app. You know, lots of complications, as with anything in online schools. We have some videos about how to join the conferences on the first day if they're on a computer, if they have an iPhone, and then we're working on one in the middle here for Android phones as well. And then as they scroll down, we have links for some of our major apps that we use for students. Clever is one of the big ones that we're really pushing right now because it helps our students manage their usernames and passwords. And then it's actually been really, really, really useful for our low-level students. One of our low-level teachers has just taught her students that the C for Clever stands for class. So she just says C for class. And then the students know. They just click on that on their shortcuts on their phones or their Chromebooks. And then from there, they just click on the different links to go into their pages. So if you are not familiar, Clever is, like I said, a password manager. It works with a lot of our school programs like Schoology, Remind, MobiMax, Google Drive, and our student portal for SID. It doesn't work for all of them. I know News ELA is one that does not have Clever capability right now, but we are working on it. We hope to get there soon. Or we hope to get Clever there soon at least, but squeaky wheel gets the grease. Okay, let's see a few more questions. Are there any questions about this pre-orientation page? It looks like there was a question about, do all students need an email? That Tim answered that they need an email. There is instructions in the registration form that if they don't have an email or they can't fill out the form, because there are some students who they didn't learn to read in their home languages and that kind of stuff. So there is instructions in the form to call the office if they need more help. So yeah, it looks like Tim answered that as well. Okay, but yes, and then also a reminder just from what Sarah was saying in the chat, that Clever creates almost all of our school accounts for our students as well. So they join class and then all of their accounts are already created for them, which is really nice. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. In that case, this is what our Schoology page looks like, or my Schoology page for orientation. One of the main things that we noticed that was really, really difficult for students at first was finding the class to get to, the live class. So I've tweaked my page as we went. A lot of students misunderstood at first, and they didn't realize that they had to join me live to finish orientation. They kind of thought it was just entirely asynchronous, that the teacher would post materials for them online, and then they would just complete them at their own pace. So we had some students right away who were confused about what exactly our online classes were. So I've got this little flag of you must attend. And then also, a lot of students were confused about where conferences even was. So I've got this link right here first thing on the page. There's more links at the bottom of my page about how to join the Schoology conference. And then there's this little link on the side. This is the teacher view. It's not quite as busy from the student side, but I found that having that first link right in the middle of the screen right away was really helpful for students, especially at the lower level. And then this is what it looks like if a student were to come onto the page and there was a conference that was not active. I try to only have one conference scheduled at any time because it can be really confusing, especially again for the low level students if there's more than one conference. Some teachers will have them planned out for the week, but the low level students, they tend to get confused and not know where to click. So another thing that I've noticed is that it's not very intuitive. I can start this conference and we can see what that looks like. You just, but once you start it, it doesn't look much different. They get the green in progress thing. That's about the only sign that they have. And then also the link for the conference title becomes their pathway into the class. Again, it was not very intuitive for students, especially if it was just named Day 1 conference or something like that. They didn't understand what was supposed to happen because there's not a big pretty join button or something. So I started naming all of my Schoology conferences, click here. Or for the mid-level ELLs, I usually say touch here because a lot of them are using their phones. And that's sort of a disconnect recently that I've noticed with the ELL students is that they don't necessarily understand what click here means. So for the mid-level students, I usually say touch here if they're on their phones. And then for the low-level students, that's the mid-level, that's the conference. Okay. For the low-level students, I get a lot of support at the low level. I have 2 of our LSS staff join me. So the low level students, the LSS staff join me for translation. But the low level students, I have it translated for Spanish and Somali, just says click here, so that they hopefully have a little bit of support while I am teaching, because it's harder to give them the attention that they need when they're saying, teacher, I'm stuck, I don't know, when I'm in class with other students. So, and usually those messages start coming in 5 to 10 minutes after class starts. So I found that to be really useful to name, for our purposes, to name the conferences, click here or touch here, that kind of stuff. Okay. I feel like that was maybe kind of a lot. I'm just kind of curious, is anyone else also using Schoology, or most of you using Google Meet? Okay, let's see, Google Classroom. Okay, so it seems like based on what's come in already, sort of confirms what my hunch was, in that most other programs are using something other than Schoology. Looks like a lot. It looks like it's pretty even split between Google Sites or some sort of Google product and Zoom. Yeah, I totally agree with the trying to prevent them from remembering so many areas to click on. That's definitely something that we struggle with. But I think once we get through orientation, once students are in the first time, they generally get it by the second day. Yeah, that is one of the perks. Sarah says, I like the idea of using Schoology. We wouldn't have an email to link every day, or we wouldn't have to email out a link every day, just click on the same page. That is one of the perks. Once they know where it is, they generally don't have any trouble. It's just that, setting the routine, as with anything, they struggle for the first week or two, maybe. But I have found that generally by even day 2 or 3 of orientation, they generally understand what's going on. There are some students who still struggle, especially those with learning disabilities. or especially if they have physical, or I guess any sort of disability, it can be a struggle for them. We are working on improving the process for those students from an equity perspective, but again, we're not quite there yet, unfortunately, but we're working on it. Okay. So I guess I can take you through what a Schoology conference looks like. So it looks like some of you are using Schoology, but just not for conferences. So when a student or teacher joins a conference, they first get this pop-up. And honestly, this pop-up is a pretty big hurdle for some of our students. They don't understand what they need to do here. So I know that a lot of our LSS staff, they spend a lot of time before a student joins a conference for the first time, or if somebody misses the first day, they will reach out to somebody and say they're confused about what was happening. And then they get the explanation of what to do here. For me, I tell students eventually they get the hang of it about microphone means talk, headphones mean listen. Most students, I would say 80% of them on the first day, they pick headphones because they're nervous. So most of them pick headphones at first. Towards the end of the day or towards the end of the week, they'll trend toward microphone. And then one of the very first things that I talk about in my orientation class is sort of online etiquette so everyone can hear the teacher. Everybody needs to have their microphone off. If you turn your microphone on for a question, that's fine. But, just there's a lot of background noise in a lot of people's environments. So that's the first thing that we talk about is turn your microphone off unless you have a question. From our perspective, we also tell students it's not required to turn their cameras on if they don't want their cameras on. A lot of students, they struggle with bandwidth, so we don't want to require it. And also a lot of our students are at home. If they're a female Muslim student, they might not have their hijab on and they don't want to put it on, so we don't have them turn their camera on if they don't want to. Some students do, and it's always kind of nice. You kind of wave at them, but they don't have to. So. All right. Let's see. We'll do microphone for the sake of this. This is another thing that's tricky for students is the allow. That comes up every time. Again, they get used to it pretty quick. From my perspective, I can see on the side, like you can see my icon here, probably just barely. But my icon over here, it doesn't have in the corner here, there's usually a microphone or a headphone symbol. And from my perspective, I know that a student can't hear me until I see something there. So if I see a student who's at this point for a really long time, then I'll start typing in the chat or start typing on the screen and trying to help them out and say, you got to touch the microphone or headphones. It's really tricky, but again, it's something that they get used to pretty quick. Oop. Okay. From this side, I just have, for orientation, I have a really short presentation, that I need to actually upload. That just includes a few screenshots. So I've got a short presentation that includes a few screenshots of the Schoology conference, which unfortunately you can't upload before you start the conference, which I know is one thing that a lot of our teachers complain about. It's sort of a drag. You get your class started and then you're spending the first few minutes getting everything set up. But within this, I have these screenshots so that I can coach students through. If they're trying to turn their microphone on, I can annotate over here. I can say, click on that phone and then click the microphone, and I can draw all over it and that kind of stuff to coach them through the different buttons. We spend a lot of time teaching them how to use the public chat, how to send their teacher a private chat, and then how to set a status so that they can say they're away from their computer. some of our teachers use a thumbs up as a wait time strategy so that they can ask a longer ended question, and then they teach their students to set a thumbs up status when they're finished typing, and then they'll ask their students to send everything at the same time, which again, like like all of our other strategies, is tricky for them at first, but they do get the hang of it after a while. I teach them how to do it in orientation so that it's not a new strategy when they're in their classes. I have a couple of just handwritten or hand-drawn pictures that I hold up to my camera, and it says, one of them says wait thumbs up, so that they know they need to set a thumbs up. And then I've just got another one that has a picture of the send button on it, and then I tell them, okay, we're all ready, send it. There's always a few students who send a little early the first few times, but again, they get the hang of it. It is tricky for a lot of students, but like I said a million times, it works out in the end. They do like it. I think a lot of students, especially now, they see the benefit of it now that they're kind of used to it as a whole, especially now they don't have to worry about parking. Our new building and on Lake Street didn't have a great parking lot, and I know a lot of students complained about it. Or sorry, it has a great parking lot. It's a new parking lot, but it's small. So there wasn't a ton of parking. And I know a lot of students are happy that they don't have to take the bus or drive in the snow, that kind of stuff. So even though getting them in is a big process, I think it's really worth it in the end. One thing that I do is I always type, and I make the font size the biggest it is, and then I usually type out what I'm saying. Even for the HSE group, I type out what I'm saying, just if they have a loud background, if their speakers aren't the greatest, if they're listening on a phone. There's a lot of different things, but I usually type out what I'm saying. Okay. Let's see. Oh yeah, there's mics and cameras. There's a polling option in here where you can say yes or no, custom poll, that kind of stuff. There's an interactive whiteboard, which students usually have a fun time. They can all draw on it. That one is a little bit interesting, especially for students with a phone. They often don't know they need to touch and drag to draw. So right away at the beginning, it was kind of interesting because I would be introducing this, and then I'd see all these dots pop up on the screen and be like, where are those coming from? And then I realized that it was phone users not knowing that they need to touch and drag. So stuff like that, I'd catch a glimpse of who was doing it, because you can see my name tag pops up there in interactive whiteboard. So I'd catch a glimpse of it when students were touching and then have to teach them how to touch and drag. So let's see. And then there's breakout rooms. That one, some of our teachers have a hard time with it. I generally don't. What happens with a breakout room is when you create one, there's a join button that pops up that sometimes students, they don't realize that it's the teacher doing it. And they sort of think it's like, it sounds like what happens is they sort of view it like getting a call unexpectedly in the middle of class, and then they panic and they close it thinking that it's somebody interrupting their class. So they close the pop-up, but then in actuality, it's the teacher is trying to create a breakout room for them. Once again, like everything else, once they get the hang of it, they know what to do and it's fine, it's seamless. Yeah. Let's see. One thing that is different for the HSE and the high level ELL orientations are roughly the same. It's the difference between the two is usually just the HSE group, we have to set up a GED account, which I have some videos. I have videos that walk them through the whole process in case they need more help. But then the high level ELL group, we don't do a GED account. That's the main difference between the two. And then I usually will go slower, repeat instructions more frequently, simpler sentences. But the low level group, that one is, we had a couple of really rocky weeks at first trying to get those low level students in. We had the translation support from the beginning, But we realized as we went on that what works really well for our students is to divide them up and have 2 shorter sessions. So we have two-day sessions, and the first 2 days are with Spanish translation, and then the second 2 days are with Somali translation. On our site in the evening, those are our main groups that we have. We generally have vast majority Spanish and Somali. However, we don't always have just Spanish and Somali. So when it does happen that we have a student who is a low-level student who is not in one of our main groups that we translate for, we'll generally give them a call ahead of time and let them know. It's a bilingual orientation, and then it's just sort of the same thing of just really slow repetition, lots of modeling on the screen. That's kind of why I've got these screenshots so I can draw all over them. If I trust it enough, I will sometimes throw in some Google Translate, but it's not the greatest for some of the, if it's a main European Romance language, I generally trust it enough, but once it gets a little bit less common than that, it generally doesn't go as well. Okay, I've been talking for a while. Is there any questions that are popping up? Okay. All right. Okay. So in that case, we'll pop over to Clever. Clever, like I said, is one of our main password management websites. Clever, we have found to be really useful for a lot of our students, but it's also pretty tricky to get it set up, which again, it's another thing that I take care of in orientation. But I know that it helps a lot of students, especially students who are using small devices on their phones. It's a lot harder for them to jump around and type in their passwords and that kind of stuff. But I will say one thing that we've noticed is that some of our students are using if they're in the Minneapolis school district, if they have children, some of them are using their children's MPS Chromebooks or devices. So a lot of our students have their kids are signed into Clever on those devices because the MPS as a whole is using Clever. So they don't want to sign in to Clever on their student or on their kids' devices. But then we have to walk them through how to sign it in on their phones, which is a trickier process. But from here, we've got our main links that students will use, and then depending on the level, there's a few other ones that teachers can add as they go on. So for example, if a student's in an HSE group, they would see a GED pop up here, or they would see ventures if they're in an ELL class. Whatever their teacher is using, if it's connected to Clever, they can customize what shows up to their students. We mostly use it for, most of our students use it for Remind and MobiMax. For those two. Remind is a messaging app that our students can use to send their teachers messages and questions. It generally works really well. Once they know what it is, they get the hang of it pretty quick. They like it. It tends to be a lot more intuitive for them than email. For one, because our emails that are district emails are super long and super easy to type in wrong. But then also it's more like texting, which a lot of them in the era of smartphones are much more accustomed to. The other one that they use is MobiMax. which is just sort of supplemental lessons for students. It's got pretty much everything. We use it all across the board from pre-lit all the way through HSE. The thing that it doesn't have it doesn't have any speaking lessons for our listening and speaking students, which I know a lot of them are really disappointed about, but nothing to be done there. But otherwise, it's got a lot of everything. A lot of students really like it, especially I've gotten some students who will reach out to me and remind before orientation, and then they will ask for MobyMax lessons while they wait for orientation. So that can be a great way to help refresh their memories. It is unbelievably common for our students, our HSE students, to come in and mostly feel like they just need a brush up on like the formal rules of fractions. So our students will come in, and that's generally what I assign to them as just like this is what MobyMax is, this is what it looks like, and I assign them pretty much just across the board fractions lessons so that they can see what it looks like, but then also it doubles as a little refresher course for students so that they can go into their first classes feeling like they have, feeling a little bit more confident about their skills and needing less one-on-one attention from the teacher as they go in. Okay. I'm looking at the time. I see we're a little shy of 10 minutes. Okay. And I'm seeing Laura saying, seems like you have a good process for getting students on board, consistency and continuity, great work. Some ideas of what to replicate and adapt. Great. I'm glad it was inspiring. I will say that as an individual teacher, my PLC is working on improving this process. And one of the things that we are really hoping to accomplish is to be able to send out a more consistent email to students. That first email of here's your schedule, here's what time and date, that email we're hoping to improve and be able to send out a translated version of it for Spanish, Somali, and Hmong, so that they can get an email that has a video right in it of how to join the first day of class in their home language as much as we can, just to sort of support that first interaction with students, because I think that's what we've gotten feedback from our LSS staff, is from what they have said is that's what they spend the most time on, is teaching students how to get in for the very first day. That we spend a lot of time doing that, which is worth it. I think I average my class sizes, they tend to be on my roster, tend to be about 30. And I would say that all across the board, low-level students all the way through HSE, I tend to have, I would say it hovers around 15 that actually show up throughout the week, which it's a little bit lower than what we had in person. My HSE roster numbers are actually much higher than they were in person. I would say my high-level ELL class, that's the one that I've seen a drop in. We never used to do orientation for the low-level students. They would just come in and go straight to class. But we've discovered that now we actually have to have orientation for those students because they have to learn the technology piece of it, which is a struggle for some students. I know we've got some students have mentioned in orientation class that I thought I was learning English. This is just a computer class. But, you got to do what you got to do. Any questions for the last 4 minutes? It was kind of a whirlwind, so. Oh, I'm looking at my agenda here and I realized I didn't do the Google Drive thing. We can connect Google Drive to Schoology, which is mostly used at the HSE level, I would say. I think most of our our students or most of our teachers feel like it's beneficial at that level. I think some of our lower level teachers feel like it's a little difficult for some of their students, but I set it up for all of them regardless, just in case. I just gotta find my page here that has it. That doesn't have it. Ooh, I've been having some technical troubles with Schoology lately, with specifically the writing lesson. So I might have hidden it. Oh no, it's just on the first page. Another tip, I have the various components that are the most difficult for students. I have those on the first day, which is sort of, it's a little bit of a, it's a little bit surprising for some students to have something difficult right away off the first day. But I've found that if the students get through that the first day, if they're having problems, it's best to address it early on and not to leave it till last when they might be struggling and then you never get through it. Okay. So this, let's see if it'll work for me. Nope, it's still, okay, it's still broken. Generally speaking, a student they'll see a blue button to connect their Gmail account. If all goes well, all they have to do is click that blue button and then sign in with their username and password, and then that's it, and it's connected. Sometimes they struggle and you have to click this link and kind of guide them through a few hoops. Generally speaking, it can be tricky, it's usually not. And if it is tricky for students, I have a video built in that walks them through the process, ideally when it's working. So it's got the login, and then if something is going wrong, click that link, so that if I'm doing something or if they're working on it ahead of time, they've got that guidance for them just built into the assignment. So that's the Google Drive stuff.
Got one question there, Amanda.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
Do-
yeah, okay. So do students complete assignments in Google Drive and it will upload? Yeah, it's more like it's a live link. I wish it was working. I'll maybe just play this video so you can see. Hopefully you won't be able to hear it because you'll just hear me talking. But what happens is you can kind of see in the video, but can you hear that? Doesn't look like it. Okay. So there's the connect button. And then what happens is once it's connected, they click this edit button and it pops their Google Docs tab open, and then they type in it, and then they come back to this page and click submit assignment, and then it pops up on your side in this little box. So for this student, I would normally be able to see like a window where it would show me their Google Doc, and it would show me what they typed, and then you can pop it out and you can comment on it just like it's a Google Doc. Does that answer your question, Sarah? Okay, great. Any other last minute questions? I know we're at the end of our time here. Yes, there is an evaluation, so stick around for a second here. Looks like Andrea just posted the link in the chat for the evaluation. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen so you can stop seeing this error page.
All right, wonderful, Amanda. Thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.